Here today at the teaching and whoops. All right, now we're recording. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here today at the Teaching and Learning Conference at the University of Waterloo and to present to you our sort of panel conversation workshop on coordinate and collaborate, how academic support units help instructors do more with less, which I feel like is timely for everyone here at Waterloo specifically, but also generally in higher education at this time. I'm going to let all of my colleagues introduce themselves with a brief description, but I do want to send a note that Clare Bermingham, the director of the Writing and Communication Center, sends her regrets. She was initially supposed to be here. This whole panel was her idea, and unfortunately, she's not able to make it today. And we have Nadine Flad stepping up in her place. So props to Clare for thinking of this great presentation. I'll introduce myself quickly and then pass it over to my colleagues. So I'm Angela Rooke, Manager of Academic Success and Retention in the Student Success Office. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman. I have long blonde hair worn down today, and I'm wearing a sort of speckled black and white top with a white cardigan. I'll pass it over to Nadine to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nadine Flad. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the manager of student and postdoctoral programs at the Writing and Communication Center. I'm a white woman with chin length, dark brown hair, and black thick rimmed glasses. And I am wearing a royal blue blouse with a black blazer today. And I'm going to pass things on to Jenna.
Thanks, Nadine. So my name is Jenna Hampshire, and my pronouns are she and her. I am an academic development and retention specialist in the Student Success Office, and today I am wearing my long blonde hair down with a teal t-shirt and a white cardigan, and I have my black glasses on. Jirina.
Good morning, folks. My name is Jirina Poch. I'm the Workshops and Integrated Programs Coordinator at the Writing and Communication Center. I've been over here almost 12 years. I have dirty blonde hair. I am white. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm wearing a purple gray top, and I'm of European descent.
Thanks, Jirina. So I do want to take a moment to have you again read University of Waterloo's territorial acknowledgement, which is here on your screen, which acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples on the Haldimand Tract, land granted to the Six Nations that extends 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. I also ask you to note the image, which visually demonstrates the difference between the Haldimand Tract that was granted to the Six Nations in 1784 and the actual acreage of the Six Nations Reserve established in 1847, which covered just 5% of the area initially granted by Haldimand. I am a settler on this land. My mother is a descendant of British and German immigrants in the 18th century who first settled in Nova Scotia and Ontario, respectively. My father immigrated to Canada with his parents from England in the 1950s. My ancestors' settlement in Canada was made possible by the processes of colonization and the displacement of Indigenous people from their land. I was born here in Kitchener-Waterloo and remain an uninvited guest on this land where I live, work, and play, holding many privileges as a result of the whiteness of my skin, my socioeconomic status, and my gender identity. Although I was born here, I spent the majority of my childhood and youth in a small town, Hudson, in Quebec, which is unceded territory of the Ganyangaha, or Mohawk peoples. Hudson is located right across the Ottawa River from the town of Oka and the community of Conestoga, where in 1990 it became the site of the Conestoga Resistance, or as it is often known, the Oka Crisis. This was a 78-day standoff between Mohawk protesters and Canadian authorities. I was 6 years old, but I vividly remember the transformation of our small town doctor's office into a full-blown MASH unit with camouflage army tents set up outside the clinic. If you're unfamiliar with this history, I encourage you to learn more about it, as I did once I became an adult. The Conestoga Resistance is credited with inspiring the Idle No More movement, the 1991 Royal Commission on the Status of Aboriginal Peoples, and the calls for an inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. I close this acknowledgement with my commitments to reconciliation, which include an ongoing commitment to continue learning about the histories of Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island and elsewhere, reading both fiction and nonfiction published by Indigenous writers, advocating for sustainability practices and appropriate caretaking of this land and its creatures. Importantly, I also commit to continue learning about, standing with, and celebrating past, present, and future acts of Indigenous resistance. So let's move on to what our agenda is today. We're going to start with who we are as academic support units and a little bit about what we do. Then we're going to move to instructors, what we're hearing from you and the challenges you're facing in the classroom. We'll briefly share some of the challenges we're facing as academic support units, what we know the challenges are that students are facing right now, and a proposed solution, which is that we collaborate and coordinate with one another. And then we'll jump into 2 case studies where the Student Success Office embedded our programming into a classroom, and similarly when Writing and Communication Center did the same with another class. And then we should have lots of time for questions and discussion at the end. All right, so a little bit first about who we are, and I'll pass it over to Nadine for this.
Okay, so at the Writing and Communication Center, familiarly known as the WCC across campus, our goal is to foster excellence in written, spoken, and visual communication. As an academic support unit, we support learners in developing the skills to effectively articulate their ideas while meeting the varied expectations of their disciplines and communication tasks. To achieve this goal, we offer focused, individualized teaching at all stages of the writing process. And we help undergraduate students, graduate students, and postdoctoral scholars to apply best practices in communication, experience their work as others do, and develop skills and strategies that last a lifetime. We support and promote a lively cross-disciplinary writing culture on campus and online through a range of programs and services. And you can see those listed on the screen. They range from one-to-one appointments with full-time advisors and peer tutors, to asynchronous online self-directed workshops, to course integrated support or custom workshops for classes, which we'll be focusing our attention on today, to the Right Spot, which is a drop-in co-working and tutoring space, to online learning resources or web-based handouts, and disciplinary and interdisciplinary writing groups and communities and programming specific to graduate student milestones. So I'm going to hand things back to Angela to talk about the SSA.
Yes, thanks, Nadine. So I don't know if many of you were probably at the opening session, so I apologize if this is a bit repetitive, but we're from the Student Success Office, Jenna and I, and the SSO defines student success as when students graduate having achieved their self-identified goals, having actively engaged both inside and outside the classroom, and ready to apply what they've learned. Our office supports students in a range of ways in service of these goals, including through new student transition programs, leadership development, community building programs, and more. But we'll talk today a little bit more about the academic programming. So what we do on the academic side is we offer course-embedded supports and consultations with instructors, which you'll learn more about today. Our team does teach 2 4-credit courses for students who've experienced academic challenges. We offer a short student self-assessment on learning skills called My Learning Skills Evaluation, which you can share with students or embed in your course. We offer support for tutoring through a tutor connection service and some tutoring in residence programs. We have a range of quick tips and tools, which are short, accessible articles and worksheets on our website, some short 30 to 45-minute micro courses, which are online learn modules, workshops on academic skills and strategies, and our very successful one-on-one peer success coaching, which is where upper year peers get paired with a student to talk about and learn new strategies with regards to their learning skills.
So we are seeing and hearing from instructors and experiencing ourselves as well some similar challenges. So I'm going to just have Jirina move to the next slide, please. Okay. So what we're hearing from instructors is that students aren't attending class or workshops or extracurricular activities at the same levels they did before the pandemic, and that getting them to participate actively in classes, to engage when they are in class, can be a bit of a challenge. We often refer to this as the pandemic skills gap. So students who may have finished their final years of high school or their early years of post-secondary education during those first couple of years of online remote teaching might not have all of the foundational skills they need to succeed. And so in light of this, the reduced levels of student engagement, the skills gap, what we're hearing from instructors is that the solutions also often place more work or responsibility on you as instructors. So referrals, early alert programs, requests for extensions, checking in on students, all of that places an additional burden on instructors. And so in this current economic moment, as funding is cut to programs and class sizes increase, how do we manage all of this additional work to support students alongside our subject teaching? And if you could just move to the next slide, Jirina, thanks. And the next one. So as academic support units, we have challenges in reaching students as well. So currently, there is no central learning hub. There is no what we would refer to as a learning commons for academic support at University of Waterloo. So instead, the WCC and the SSO are situated on the second floor of South Campus Hall, which is a building that is old with accessibility barriers and is difficult for students to locate. Both the SSO and the WCC have attempted to bring programming to where students are, the library, the center. We've attempted to engage students with booths in central spaces like the Student Life Center or in campus housing. And this approach has benefits. There's an accessibility benefit to being where students are, but there is also a drawback because students may not know how and where to find us when we are not immediately in that space in the moment. Do they think that's where we're located? How much can we expect students to engage in these spaces when they run into us, when they're focused on other things like getting lunch in the Student Life Center? We've also tried drop-in appointments that have been attempted, across campus, but it's really costly to offer these at the frequency and for the length of time and with the consistency that is needed in a way that would benefit students the most. So if we could move on to the next slide, Jirina. Thank you. So like faculty, we are facing challenges around engagement and reach with this additional space-based challenge around awareness. So students, when we ask them, continue to indicate that the services that we offer are what they need the most. And Angela will tell you more about that in a moment. But that doesn't necessarily translate into students actually making use of and accessing the services that we offer. Workshop attendance and program attendance in our own services and programs has declined since the period of COVID emergency remote teaching. And that is true both online and in person. Both of our units design programming that is meant to be accessed by all students, but we know that there are cohorts of students who need our support more than others. And that's a particular challenge. How do we reach the students that need us most when they might not have the social capital or institutional knowledge to know where to find us or that we even exist? They might not have the time because of work or family or coursework pressures to be able to access our resources outside of class time. And they might fear that seeking help and support is a sign of failure or a lack of fit with a really competitive university such as University of Waterloo. So I'm going to turn things over to Angela, who's going to talk about the challenges and barriers that we see students experiencing.
Yes, thanks so much, Nadine. So a lot of what Nadine shared is what we're hearing anecdotally, what we're hearing in a little bit of the literature right now. Luckily, when it comes to the student side, we have a little bit more data about what student challenges and barriers are. So I'll highlight some of that for you now. So the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association, WUSA, did an academic success survey in 2024, and we're going to share quite a bit of data from that survey today. So when asked to select the top 4 academic supports that would most positively impact your academic success, students responded again with the things that we can offer support with, as you can see here. And additionally, open text responses to the question, is there anything else related to academic success that you'd like to share, resulted in several themes, including that students want support more accessible and easier for students to use, and that students are embarrassed asking for help. Next slide. Additionally, the WUSA Academic Success Survey pointed to some challenges with awareness and use, where we see that the majority of students were aware that we offer support resources. 57% were aware of the support resources offered by the SSO, and the Writing and Communication Center, 43% were aware. But again, as Nadine hinted, awareness does not translate into actual use. Only 8% of students reported using our support resources in the Student Success Office and 10% in the Writing and Communication Center. And so if we think about why is this the case? The WUSA survey actually asked that. What are the barriers you're facing to accessing this support? And the number one reason was lack of time. But the other answers indicate that there is also an awareness problem. When asked about the aspects of your courses that they're struggling with, again, all of those challenges are things that our units can support with. One thing to note, though, is that approaching instructors is something we can't help with necessarily, but both of our units offer peer-led programming that might be more accessible and comfortable for students. And then when it comes to the personal factors that make success in courses challenging, as Nadine hinted already, we know that they are encountering barriers, and the big ones include challenges relating to time and other responsibilities, which again suggests students aren't likely to access our services outside of class time. So that was all from the WUSA Academic Success Survey. My office, the Student Success Office, also did a barriers mapping project where they set up intercepts in the Student Life Center and had a complimentary online survey in May 2024. And what was really neat about this is it allowed us to map what were the barriers that students were facing across years of study, including the pre-arrival period. And it may take you some time to interpret this chart here, but what I want to point out is that fear of failure and imposter syndrome emerged as key barriers across all years of study, including the pre-arrival period, before they technically even start their studies. And that last year of study, students in their 4th year are still fearing failure. So, what's the solution to all of this? The hint here is on your screen. Coordinate and collaborate. The next section of our presentation is going to detail 2 case studies of how we worked with instructors to embed our supports in the classroom. But let's just quickly take a moment to discuss some of the challenges we highlighted already and how an ASU instructor collaboration can address some of them. First, as we saw, students name lack of time as one of the main reasons they don't access our supports. By embedding our supports into the classroom, we bring our supports to where students already are and they're ready to learn, benefiting those students with competing work and family responsibilities in particular. Second, it's worth pointing out that students very much see you, the instructors, as the authority and experts on their learning. They're learning in general, not just learning of that content topic. So bringing us into the classroom confirms for students that you see value and credibility in the supports we provide, and they're more likely to access our services on their own time as they encounter challenges later. After all, we know students' main barriers to success are related to fear of failure, and yet so few access the supports that can help them navigate university learning with confidence. Third, the actual reasons students say they struggle in your courses, again, are the things we can help with. developing good study habits and test prep strategies, staying on top of deadlines and assignments, and understanding the content better. And again, both of our units offer peer-led programming, which can help address the challenges students highlighted in reaching out to instructors for support. I will also suggest that working with us makes your burden a little bit lighter. You can refer students to us for many of the main reasons students say they're struggling academically, and bringing us into your classroom shows them you see value in what we have to offer. These collaborations also help us immensely. Embedding our student supports into course content demonstrates to students that the support we offer is not extracurricular, but integrated, part and parcel of what it means to be a learner at the University of Waterloo. I also include here an image of a lawn sprinkler, which might have seemed odd to you at first, because I want to mention that this approach, embedding our supports in classroom, is this sprinkler analogy rather than what we like to call the fire hose strategy. A sprinkler strategy means we're sprinkling information and supports and resources throughout an undergraduate student's experience here, rather than the fire hose approach would be blasting them with information right at the beginning when they first arrive in September of their first year, which we know is already an overwhelming time for students and a time that they won't be as receptive or likely to remember the details about our supports. So let's get into some case studies so you can see, how does this actually work in a classroom environment? How do these collaborations actually function? Over to Jenna.
Thanks, Angela. So we work with instructors in a number of different ways, and I just want to say they've all been excellent, but I do want to focus today on this case study that outlines how we in the SSO worked with the Faculty of Engineering to create a faculty-wide first-year initiative that implemented academic skills programming that was both timely and audience-specific. So when we first connected with engineering, we really wanted to identify how we can make sure that the programming that we had to offer could work for engineering students. Sometimes there's a myth that academic support unit content is really general and it can't be customized, especially when we're looking for like really niche types of courses, or this audience, it won't resonate with them. Sometimes we hear that. And while that programming certainly does exist, and part of the reason is for general ease of integration, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, we wanted to have the opportunity to work collaboratively with our faculty partners so that we could be really intentional with the integration. If we're hearing that it might not fit for an audience, why? Why is it not fitting? What could fit? Is it the structure? Is it the content? And really trying to figure out what could work. So in this case, we want to make sure that if we were going to be putting together any kind of presentation or content to be embedded in the first year engineering classroom, that we were really specific in tailoring the content so that students didn't have to work hard to see how it was relevant to them as a first year engineering student. We are giving them the resources that were directly helpful for them. As we started to consider what programming or content and structure would work for this particular audience, we considered how these students, like many coming into the University of Waterloo, are really high performers. And this is an important consideration for us because typically student success programming that focuses on academic skills and strategies is really front-loaded into the beginning of the term or throughout new student transition programming like orientation or anything that's pre-arrival. But if these students are coming in as high performers and they already believe that they have strategies that have worked for them in the past, or they are confident or competent enough to be able to think about how they could adapt their strategies, they're not going to be overly receptive to what it is that we have to share, and the strategies and resources will get lost as in their transition to university. So in working with our engineering partners, we knew that really at the beginning of the term, the students were not going to be concerned about their academic strategies. Those were covered. In their minds, they were going to be most concerned about their midterms and assessments because those are things that they would have either heard about from upper year students, or they're coming into it and it's going to be a different experience. They know it's going to be different than what they experienced in high school. They wanted to know, how do I properly prepare for those? We also know that sometimes the first midterm experience can be a bit of an eye-opener for students. They figure out, okay, how I studied in high school is not going to completely work for me now. And that includes things like how they engage with the content that they're learning in their classes, how they organize their time, how they test themselves to know if they actually have the content well understood. So using these sort of anchor points for us, we created a framework that helped us to identify general topics that we wanted to cover over 2 sessions or workshops that we were going to strategically place throughout the term. So the first one, we thought we would focus on midterm prep, and we would have before the midterm sessions really started in the Faculty of Engineering, so the end of September, really early October. And the second one, we want to focus more on those typical academic skills and strategies that we think are still really important as part of student transition, but might not necessarily be receptive earlier on. So we were going to have it later on in the term after they've experienced some assessments. So end of October, really early November. What worked great for us is that we were able to implement these 2 sessions into this course that a majority of programs in the Faculty of Engineering had. So this first year seminar called Jenny 119. The way that this non-credit seminar is structured is that it provides a chance for students to learn what else can help them be successful beyond just their engineering content. So our approach was to develop workshops that were going to fit into this seminar. So we're going to deliver it to 15 different programs twice throughout the term. And really our hope was to focus on the bottom 3 learning outcomes you can see on the screen. So understanding help-seeking behavior, feeling confident in their ability to find resources on campus, and turning challenging situations into valuable learning opportunities. By the nature of the workshop, we were also hoping to contribute to number 1, so connecting classmates to their engineering community, but that was not the main focus of us working with engineering at this point. So to make this all happen, these are the steps to our collaboration process. We were really lucky to have faculty partners in this instance who want to work through this process with us, even though I know it looks a little bit daunting when you see 7 steps to it. Essentially, we had the same goal though. We wanted to make sure that students knew the strategies and resources that were available to them that would help them be independent and successful learners. So I already mentioned that we had an initial meeting where we were able to talk out what would be useful for students in terms of content and strategies, and what challenges were existing with the generalized content that we already had. After that meeting, the SSO took away the information and created a content outline. And with that, we also created a bit of a timeline. So we had deliverables and giving an idea of when feedback would be required from the faculty, because again, one of our intentions was to make sure that when we came together, we were making the content really relevant to engineering students. We wanted to make sure there was engineering examples, engineering context, and we wanted to make sure that it was really going to land with them at the time that it was being delivered. From there, presentations were created, feedback was given, and then we delivered the content. So again, I know this process looks like a big lift in terms of timing, but the biggest part was the initial meeting, and then everything else was done either via email or was managed on our end as the academic support unit. At the end, we did a debrief where we had to determine what worked well, what could be changed, and any next steps for future offerings. So I've outlined the focus of each workshop and the high-level topics here on the screen. So our first one was really exam preparation. Our second one was the recap of the midterm performance and academic skills and strategies. Things that were really important to us in the first presentation was highlighting how to identify testable content using course outlines, something that students probably weren't going to be familiar with from their previous experiences, and using course outlines that they would be in class with. So for example, one of their chemistry courses. We also wanted to make sure that individuals were prepared for exams when studying. So one of the things that's really great about engineering is they form a lot of community within their program, but we want to make sure that if they're studying as a group, they did know what content they were confident in as individuals. And then we also had a discussion about prioritizing questions and how to move on when stuck. So something that students are probably not overly familiar with, being stumped with a question, and how do you move through it rather than just struggling with it. So being okay with saying, I'll come back to it. So we talked a lot about some of those test taking strategies. We did determine after the first presentation that we needed to pull back a bit in content to really make sure that there was a chance for students to practice the strategy, partially because it allows them to see the benefit for themselves and they're actually able to try it out, but it gives them that buy-in option as well. So they see, oh, this is valuable. So in the second presentation, we used prioritization case studies as our main activity and discussion point for students that they were then able to really apply to their own lives. And we wanted to make sure to talk about asking for help, to both normalize it, but also help them understand how asking for help can look like. So what are the steps you should be doing to try things out on your own? What is the language you can use when talking to your TA or your instructors to identify where you might be struggling at that moment? And then throughout both presentations, we also tried to normalize it. There's different experiences in their first year, especially when it might come to failure. And I say failure a little bit in quotations because every student is going to have different definitions, especially when they're coming in with such high expectations of themselves, that we want them to think about it as like their experiences are like experiments. If they're in a lab in any situation, if the experiment doesn't work out, they need to go back and figure out how to change the variables. And so how do you change the strategy so that they work for you for future assessment purposes? What really worked for us here is that it was a really collaborative approach. We all wanted the students to have the supports they needed to be successful, and we were willing to try out being intentional with figuring out how to make the content context specific for students. So part of that was playing around with the timing where we would typically deliver this content. If you remember earlier, I said a lot of academic skills content tends to be front loaded earlier in the term for first year students, which kind of leads into that fire hose approach, right? That Angela was talking about, where all of your information is presented right at the beginning, but it's not overly helpful if students haven't expected any challenges where they would need to adapt new strategies. We had very positive feedback from students about the prioritization cases and time management content. And do we know for sure that we wouldn't have had that feedback if we did time management in September? No, we don't. We didn't have an in-depth assessment process directly on this content. But my hypothesis is we probably wouldn't have received that feedback. I think students, if they're being bombarded with a lot of resources at the beginning, they do a little bit of triage, and they would see like, this is not helpful for me right now, and then they forget about the resource moving forward. In this instance, we met students where they were at, and we made sure that the case examples were tangible to what an engineering student would experience, especially after they had just come off of a time where they would have had multiple assessments in a short period of time. It also helps that we were able to get in front of students and introduce them to specific resources that we offer based off of the timing that each workshop was delivered. So it aligned with their mindset, it aligned with what they were really concerned about, but we gave them additional resources like directing them to the peer success coaches that they could access anytime they need, because as much as we also want to get in front of the students to give them resources, we want to give them a bit more of the promotion about other things that we have to offer for them that can help, not just in this course, but in their future courses as well. And we have some ideas for continuing to refine for future offerings. And if I can be bold enough to say it, I think both ourselves and our faculty partners were really happy with how we did this first offering. So it was our own experiment as well to see what works. So how can you opt into working with the Student Success Office on embedding content into your classroom? I'll start again by saying it doesn't have to be as involved in this process. We have a lot of different ways we work with instructors. One way is we have these resources that we can provide support language that you can embed into your Learn Shell or present to yourself. So things like we have the SMART program, which are those micro courses that Angela mentioned earlier that focus on topics like time management, note-taking, self-advocacy, tests and exams, and a couple others. We have the My Learning Skills evaluation that I know we have some other instructors that embed directly into their course as well. And a number of quick tips and articles that we can highlight depending on different times in the term and send them to instructors to directly put into Learn. We also have a modified process to this case where we will come in and deliver workshops to your class. where there's a little bit less back and forth with the review. So the request comes in, I share an outline, and then the SSO, we put together the content and come into the classroom for delivery. Overall, we want to make it easy for instructors to work with us, and we want to make sure that the experience is good for both instructors and students. We want them to see the relevance of the content to their own academic success. Currently, the best approach is to reach out to ssoloearn@uwaterloo.ca to have an email to start the conversation. I'll turn it over to Jirina now.
Thank you, Jenna. So for our Writing and Communication Center case study, I'm going to be focusing on the Arts First collaboration. So just to give you an overview for folks who are familiar and who are not familiar, one of the pieces of the Arts First was meeting an undergraduate communication requirement to all new art students, and they were required to take 2 particular courses to help with their communication piece, Arts 130 and Arts 140. And Arts 130 focused on modes of inquiry. So the idea there was to emphasize the development of communication skills. And the second course was Arts 140, and that was more focusing on supporting diverse ways of finding and examining and using that information. And that was more with quantitative and qualitative methods of data gathering. So we've had quite a bit of a relationship in the past with communication requirements with faculties, so it just seemed like a natural fit. And we wanted to focus on some of the pieces that the Arts First program did as well, with creating that cohort of art students who are prepared for the work and thinking of arts coursework, as well as focusing on designing to support first undergrad art students in that first year of communication. And the idea there with the Arts First program as well was to help those first year students engage with faculty and each other as a cohort. Now, our collaboration, again, seemed like quite a natural fit. So to give you an overview and some of the goals that we collaborated with was focusing on really mentoring and guiding students as they learn new ways of thinking and writing, and ensuring that they know where to go for support. One of the other pieces was to really focus on increasing student engagement with peer tutors. So we focused on that peer tutor model to mentor first-year students through this particular experience, with focusing on not just literally how to write words, but how to seek for particular help and feedback. So knowing where to go and who to ask for, which is that hidden curriculum piece. We also wanted to focus on increasing student engagement with campus resources, and that could be in many forms, whether it was online self-directed workshops through our LMS Learn, or if it was in-person workshops through our advisors, our staff like myself, and visits from peer tutors. Or we also wanted to increase that engagement with the resources focused on in-person or virtual appointments for Arts for students. So really supporting students during that key transitional point, as was discussed previously, really guiding them in clear communication of academic writing values, like thinking about process over perfection, curiosity and openness to ideas, and engaging in scholarly conversations instead of working in isolation. During this key transitional period, we also wanted to make sure that we're supporting those students to build their own identities and agency as writers, and adapting to university life and expectations for writing, thinking, and speaking. And last, really supporting those students in that writing and communication development by coaching them through that writing process, because there are several steps. It's very iterative, and for quite a few students, it can be quite daunting. So that was the overview and kind of the goals for the collaboration. And to give you an example of one of the pieces that we did, one of the workshops in the Arts 130 course was an embedded active learning workshop called Finding Your Process. Now, with the collaboration with the instructor, there was a conversation that we had, and I'll go through what the opting in looks like a little bit later. But we collaborated with the instructor to think about all these challenges that the instructor and the students were having for the particular course. and what their needs were, kind of looking at what the challenges were for the course in the past, particularly what some of the challenges were for the students. And we came up with 3 kind of intended learning objectives at the end of this collaboration. And the workshop, ultimately, we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on giving students kind of an overall understanding or framework for that writing process and guiding them to specific concrete resources that they would use on campus that could support them and provide them feedback throughout their particular course. Now, we knew coming into this and coming up with these ILOs that students came to university with particular writing habits, or whether they were good or bad, or having been taught how to write, or not knowing maybe how to think or write outside that 5-paragraph essay framework, and some other habits like skipping the invention or planning and revision phases. So this workshop really gave them an opportunity to assess and reflect on their writing habits, and then provide questions on how they can learn the other tasks and steps, and then ultimately how to reach out. So we really wanted to focus on empowering them to use and build their existing skills. So these were the ILOs for the particular workshop, thinking about the different stages, improving their current writing habits, and then having WCC support when needed throughout that transition period, sprinkling it throughout the entire course instead of fire hosing them with information in the beginning. Now, we really wanted to kind of get a sense of whether we achieved these goals. And based on the feedback, the student reflections in the Arts 130, we achieved these particular goals. Now, when we think about the workshop and what we wanted to look at, we wanted to really help improve their own writing process. So the workshop introduced the concept of the writing, as well as base habits to help identify the different stages of writing. And the students really identified their approach and reflected that writing is not linear. And it lessened their overwhelming tendency for perfectionism, which really ties in nicely with the point Angela made earlier about student challenges from the WUSA academic survey. We also wanted to ensure that students know about and feel welcome to use the WCC services. So in the workshop, we focused on a WCC advisor, so they facilitated in a friendly and open manner where they could, where students could identify a face to the name, to the WCC name, and see them more as experienced advisor instead of an expert lecturer. And based on the student feedback, the students felt supported and more at ease after the workshop, that they made multiple appointments with various WCC advisors. As well, we wanted to make sure to provide concrete resources that students can use across this program. So in the actual workshop, we recommended throughout the activities and the different stages, the link specific to WCC resources at relevant points in the workshop. And those Nadine referred to earlier in the presentation. So the appointments, the online learning resource, and the self-directed workshops. Now, we achieved this by identifying that the students knew the resources to accomplish what their professor was asking of them. They knew what to use. And we also embedded tools and strategies like the Pomodoros and peer feedback within the workshop. And that really translated nicely because the feedback that we got from them was they were able to use those particular strategies, not only in Arts 130, but across other courses as well. So they had the confidence to reach out for support, as well as use the skill and transfer the skills to other particular courses. And then the last piece was we really wanted to acknowledge and validate that the challenge of learning to write academically is difficult, right? And to uncover that hidden curriculum piece of writing. So in the workshop, we highlighted that writing is a challenging process. And that was also identified when the facilitator, the instructor was able to, or the advisor was able to kind of talk about personal anecdotes and make it relevant to the work and to the challenges that students are having, as opposed to some of these survey and self-assessment pieces. And the students commented on, they appreciated the openness about the struggle of academic writing. And they understood that writing came along with other struggles like loneliness, perfectionism, and procrastinations, which were some of the key highlights that Angela identified in the WUSA survey. Now, aside the student piece, we wanted to make sure if we were achieving the goals with the instructors. So based on the instructor feedback, at the end of the term survey, we had some great feedback, as well as confirmation that what we were doing was on the right track, based on informal as well as formal feedback. So when asked if the benefits of the WCC for instructors, what they were helping support their students. They talked about being really practical, and thinking that having somebody physically there connected them with a real human visit. They connected with the students, so they were able to put a face to a name. And it seemed to have an impact. They also made a comment on other ASUs that they use as well, like our library, and that we were doing a great job. Also, the piece where the services were really useful and the workshop was really useful because it set them up for not only the assignment and get them thinking about skills that they could use across the curriculum. So not just in their particular course, but across other courses as well. So based on additional informal and just back and forth feedback, they also highlighted that it really supported and reinforces student learning at all kind of the different faculties and all the academic levels. It was really easy to integrate into the course integrated program. It was efficient and easy. There was lots of options for them. It really did help lighten the load on instructors for teaching writing and communication skills as well. So there was kind of like a team effort. And it supports the feedback loop for particular assignments. One of the feedback pieces that we talked about, or that was shared with us, that this the peer internal with the peer reviews and with the instructor, when we did in the particular workshop, it addresses trouble spots for instructors to make necessary changes or reviews for the material prior to assignment submissions or even other iterations of the course. So this particular workshop was really targeted and active to support that in-class writing and communication milestone. And this was very specific. It was a specific collaboration, as all our course integrated support is. And we continue to do this with all other faculties at all academic levels. So we really focus on tailoring the course integrated support program to work for the instructor so they can support their students better. So we can all work collectively to help with those pieces. Now, how do you opt in? Well, it's very easy. You go to our website and you request a workshop. On the screen on the bottom right, with the arrow, it basically identifies you request it. It'll take you to a Qualtrics form. You fill out the information that's required of you. It takes just a couple of minutes, and then I get it. Ultimately, the workshop and integrated programs coordinator, and I triage it within 1 to 2 days and reach out to you via email. Then there is an intake assessment piece where we talk about kind of what the needs are of the students of the course, how we can support the instructor students, and we go from there. We come up collectively with intended learning objectives, and then we schedule the actual workshop or the peer tutor for that particular term or the courses. And then we do an end of term or end of workshop survey. And that is ultimately it. It's that easy.
Thanks, Jirina. So wrapping up really quickly, if we could go to the next slide. This is our pitch to you. We've shown you some case studies of what we think have been really successful collaborations between instructors and academic support units. And we know that student engagement, which is a key indicator of student success, relies on meaningful classroom experience and a campus environment that encourages students to participate in activities and resources that support their learning and personal development. So building connections between the classroom and third space learning opportunities enrich student experience. These connections enhance learning and enable holistic student development, incorporate students' past learning experience, social positions, identities, goals, and needs. So these partnerships between course instructors and academic support services demonstrate how embedded and adjacent student support result in positive impacts on students, including accessing the hidden curriculum, wellness, connection, belonging, agency, autonomy, metacognition. And these individual student outcomes lead to larger institutional indicators of success, including learning transfer, equity, and retention. And that is good for all of us at University of Waterloo. So I'm going to hand things over to Angela, who's going to handle our Q&A session.
Thanks so much, Nadine. So I am eager to hear from all of you. I have some questions here on the screen, but I also wonder if, Jirina, you wouldn't mind stopping the recording. I don't know that all of our participants here today would like their questions to be recorded. But my first question is, did any of this spark ideas for you as instructors? Did you see in our case studies maybe thoughts about how you might integrate academic support units into your own classroom? Did anything resonate with you? And this applies for those of you who are not here from the University of Waterloo, but another institution. Our services are replicated across institutions across Ontario, Canada, and North America. So curious if this resonated with you and how you might integrate ASU support. If nothing does resonate, or maybe there are barriers for you, we would love to know what they are. And if those of you from other institutions have examples of how you've worked with ASUs, we'd love to know what that looks like or why you're not using them. I see already a question from Dr. Munir from the World Institute on Disability. How do you support students with disabilities? And are there any challenges identified by students in reflections? I'm assuming challenges identified by students is particularly with regards to challenges relating to their disabilities. So I can speak a little bit about how the Student Success Office supports students with disabilities. We work really closely with the Accessibility Office, which offers academic accommodations to students with disabilities. And they also do offer very similar learning supports to what our Student Success Office does, but they offer it in a way that's more tailored to the accommodations plan. But we often refer students to one another. So if they don't feel like they're getting the right level of support or as much support as needed from accessibility services, they will refer them to our peer success coaches, who can have a lot more time to meet with the students and can dedicate a little bit more time to their support. And similarly, if we meet with students and suspect that they may have a disability, or the student suggests they suspect they might have a disability, we encourage them to register with AAS so they can have access to the suite of accommodations. I don't know if Nadine, you'd like to speak to students with disabilities on the writing and communication side. And I'm not sure that Jenna spoke to reflections from the students. So I don't think question 2 is for us.
Yeah, so within the course integrated support, we're using universal design for learning, and we're often presenting information in multiple modes so that it is as accessible as possible to as wide a range of students as possible. That needs assessment process, the intake conversation that Jirina has with instructors often also covers, what kinds of specific accessibility needs might be in place for a classroom. The beauty of our primary service, the one-on-one appointments, is, students can have an opportunity to identify, without disclosing a specific disability, what kinds of support they might find most helpful. So we can really tailor that one-on-one in a conversation so that students can get what they need out of that support at a really individualized level. Yeah. Jirina, do you want to talk about the reflections? We're having some unmuting trouble here. Let's just give Jirina a moment.
Okay, sorry, sorry, Nadine. Can you repeat the question, please? I was trying to do my recording or unrecording here. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Oh, now I can't hear you.
I automatically unmuted myself once you started talking. The question is in the chat about supporting students with disabilities. And we've already talked about
Yep.
how generally the SSO and the WCC support students with disabilities. But the specific question for you is, were there any challenges reflected in students' reflections around supporting students with disabilities?
Not when I looked at the raw data, nothing there was alarming in terms of accessibility at all. When we design these particular workshops, we focus on universal design in the classroom, as well as making sure that students have access to them prior to the advisor coming in. So they do have access to the workbook or any kind of worksheets or additional resources that we have prior to us coming in. So they identify that they liked that piece, that having the material before we were to get into the classroom, so they can prepare and kind of know what the expectations were, and then basically use whatever mode they wanted, whether they wanted a digital copy, which was provided to them through the Learn site, through their course Learn site, but also the advisor would bring in paper copies or hard copies of the material. So students always had that option, and it was just kind of an ask in the beginning of the workshop. You know, we have hard copies here. How many of you would like those pieces? And usually, most of the time, students like kind of that handheld, that piece as well, for those that like the handheld or the hard copies, but they also had the option of having it used digitally as well. But nothing aside from those pieces, nothing else came up in the reflections.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jirina.
Yeah.
We have a couple more minutes. Again, thinking back to those prompts, I'm super curious to hear from instructors. Can you think of a moment in your course where it might make sense to bring in an ASU, whether that be the SSO, the Writing and Communication Center, the library? Did this prompt for you any thinking about how you might work with an academic support unit to support the students in your course with maybe some learning or research skills, for example? Or if you have another question, feel free to unmute yourself or just throw it here in the chat. I see a general comment from Jen. Often the students most in need of the support are the very same ones not attending classes. Yes, I know. This is the challenge that both us as ASUs and instructors are facing. How do we reach the students who need the support the most? And we do acknowledge, you know, so for us, we're like, well, if we can get into the classroom, but what you're saying is, well, it's often those very same students that aren't attending class. So I think honestly, we really have to just sort of try our best. We do know that in some faculties, they're doing some like early alert programming at the faculty or department level where they identify students maybe who perform poorly on their midterms and then do some early reach out and request meetings with their academic advisors. I think that is a good strategy for that cohort. But I hand it over to, I can't see your full last name. Prof. Andrew is what I see here on the screen.
I'm so sorry. I just removed the prof. I was asked to put that on for a thing I was doing for outreach the other day, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's still there. Hi, I'm Andrew. And let me turn on my video as well. Yeah, good point, Jen. I teach first year, and I agree. All of the things that we're working on, it's only the people who show up. I will sometimes just give them grades for showing up if it's that important. I had the elephant in the room question for the Writing and Communication Center people, because the course I teach is design and professionalism and communication. What are you suggesting people have their students write these days when ChatGPT can write anything that's been written lots before?
Oh my goodness. I have lots to say on this topic. I would love to chat with you one-on-one, because we are going to run out of time in about a minute.
Yeah, feel free to say that's not actually the point of this conversation. So, I'll
but
book
yes,
one-on-one.
yeah, I think it's less about what we have students write and more about the process of, scaffolding the entire writing process. So having students show their work, creating annotated bibliographies, proposals, etc., so that the final product, that final capstone assignment is not the only thing you're seeing. And that really encourages students to actually be involved in the process. The flip side is sometimes you start with ChatGPT. You say, yes, students, produce something in ChatGPT, and now your task is to critique it, demonstrate your learning by showing us what doesn't work about what ChatGPT has produced. And so the writing is actually responding to ChatGPT. So you just take the temptation to have ChatGPT create the document out of the equation by acknowledging and front-loading ChatGPT creating a document at the very beginning of the process. Yeah, but I'd be happy to talk to you, one-on-one, send us an email.
Sure.
We've been thinking a lot about this.
Me too. I will definitely be reaching out. So thank you.
Thank you for your question, Andrew, and the others putting some comments in the chat. Unfortunately, we are at time, so we will have to wrap up, but we are very eager to continue these conversations. So please reach out to any of us if you'd like to continue them over the next couple of days or beyond. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.